Policy at the Iowa DOT. Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar entitled Building a Better Brand, which will feature 3 presentations from Ohio DOT, Georgia DOT, and Oregon DOT. I'll introduce our speakers as we go, more on our first presenters in just a moment. Today's webinar is part of AASHTO's Committee on Transportation Communications, or TransComm's, mission to facilitate the sharing of best practices among state DOTs. The membership of this committee, led by newly appointed chairperson Diane Gutierrez-Scacchetti, Commissioner of the New Jersey DOT, is comprised of the top communication officials from each of the 52 AASHTO member departments. Among other activities, TransComm hosts an annual meeting that focuses on best practices, state-to-state collaborate, and professional development. This webinar is open to all, so feel free to share information on the series with friends and colleagues. The presentation will be recorded and uploaded to the TransComm website, which is communications.transportation.org, where you can learn about TransComm's regular webinar series and general TransComm information. Before we get started, a few things to keep in mind. Please type your questions into the questions box. Today's speakers will cover quite a bit of ground, but rest assured we've planned a robust question and answer session, and we hope to get to your questions when all the presentations are finished. One more thing. Throughout today's webinar, your lines will be muted, but please do not put us on hold, as music will begin playing over the speaker. So now on to our first set of speakers. Dave Rose is Internal Communications Manager for the Ohio DOT. He leads a team of writers and designers who collaborate with executive leadership and employees to creatively tell ODOT's story. He is also a certified change management practitioner and leads the communication strategy for complex enterprise-wide project implementations. Erica Hawkins is the Chief Communications Officer for the Ohio DOT. Since joining the ODOT team in 2016, Erica has worked to modernize the department's brand and identity guidelines, internal and external communications, and website with a focus of presenting a unified look, voice, and message for the decentralized agency. Okay, Dave and Erica, I'm going to pass the screen to you and get started.
Awesome. What's up, everyone?
Hello.
Hope everyone's doing well out there. Thanks again to Maggie and to Andrea. Really appreciate you setting us up and allowing us to tell our story and what we went through the last few years ago. And definitely a shout out to Scott and Michelle, the other webinar panelists. Excited to hear from them. Of course, I'm Dave, and I'm going to have Erica kick us off about the Ohio DOT rebrand.
Yeah. So not long after I started with Ohio DOT back in the fall of 2016, I was going over some items with my assistant director of things I should be focusing my time on. And he looks at me and he says, you know, one thing I really want you to figure out is how can we get everybody's PowerPoint presentations to look better and also to look the same. And he pointed as an example, similar to what you can see on the slide, of we would routinely give presentations that didn't look anything like, you could not tell by looking at it that whoever was presenting on behalf of ODOT. And so I asked, well, do you have PowerPoint templates? He said, I don't know, I think so. I said, have you ever told everybody they have to use them? He said, no, definitely not. So it started a conversation about how we really, as an agency, had a logo. We had, you know, this general idea that our color was green, like our signs. But other than that, there really weren't any standards or guidelines around our brand as an agency. We didn't really have any protection of our logos. You could see that everybody agreed that green was our color, but everybody was using different color values for the green. The greens didn't even match up from person to person, or even sometimes the same person's presentation to presentation. It really was kind of the Wild West, and employees in offices basically did whatever they wanted, and we didn't really give them any guidance to follow. There was a document that attempted to do this, but it was never really widely shared or adopted. So we decided that we were going to take on this project of developing, really for the first time for the agency, some comprehensive brand standards. You know, we weren't necessarily rebranding because we were using a lot of the same assets that we had previously, but we were giving definition and guardrails in order to kind of protect those assets better than we have before. If you want to move on, Dave. So we decided the way we were going to do this is we got together a committee. We did this internal to our communication shop, and we brought in internal comms, we brought in social media people, we brought in our designers to start having a conversation. We met once a week, every week for about 6 months. We started by looking at other agencies' brand guidelines, both in the public sector and then also some private corporations as well. We looked at universities too, as another great example of institutions that have very strong brand protection assets. And we've used this to kind of develop the list of items that we wanted to address in our own brand guidelines. So we built an outline of things that we needed to make decisions on: color values, logo positioning, logo usage, fonts, voice, all these different subsections of what would become ultimately our brand book. And every week we would tackle a different topic. And we would kind of organize the work into things that we agreed on, and that was going in, and then things that we maybe didn't agree on and we still needed to have some conversations and finalize. And we just kind of kept running lists and worked through all those items until we had consensus on everything that we had kind of set out to set guidelines across. Everybody was allowed to bring their ideas to the table. When we were doing some design work, which Dave will touch on in a minute, we had a blank cube wall and a box of push pins, and people could go and work on their ideas in their spare time and put them on the board. And we would get up and have our meetings standing around looking at the board and looking at different people's thoughts and ideas, and discuss those as a group. And it really worked well as just a very collaborative process where everybody got a chance to talk through. There was a lot of skepticism that we had to overcome about how much of this we could actually enforce. But in the end, we decided we were going to go ahead and make decisions on all these things. And we were going to present a document to senior leadership and try to get their buy-in on us moving forward with actually enforcing a lot of the items that we wanted to cover. Once the brand draft book was done, then it was time for us to go to senior leadership because we knew, like I said, that we needed their buy-in in order for us to push this with the agency, because we were going to tell people, you can't use this letterhead anymore. You can't use this logo that you created for your division anymore. You can't use this PowerPoint template that you like to use for all of your PowerPoints anymore. And we knew we needed the senior leadership to back us up if we were going to try to sell that to the agency. And our pitch to senior leadership went really well, actually. I think we're on the next slide, Dave. Our pitch to senior leadership went really well. They saw the vision for what we wanted to do and how it would really make our agency function internally and externally, and with more professionalism. They really saw this as a project that made our agency better, and that the growing pains that would be associated with trying to rein in a lot of the rogue brand usage were really going to be worth it in the end, because it gave us a cohesive, professional, modern look to everything that we were going to do.
Thank you, Erica.
So at this point, yeah, Dave's going to talk a little bit about kind of what we actually worked on and kind of how that process went.
Awesome. Thank you, Erica. And during this process, we refer to, excuse me, Erica as our fairy brand mother. So we still refer to her to that same name today. So thank you, fairy brand mother. But we knew that if we were going to be successful with this rollout, with the whole branding effort, that we needed, like Erica mentioned, to engage senior leadership, make them understand why branding is so important to ODOT. And I think what we really needed to do is try to show them, again, lots of engineers, how the connection between themselves is reflected in the ODOT brand, that it's just not, you know, the logo, a visual identity, but it really is the people. And so this quote here is what we had early on in our brand book. It's one of the first things employees see, and it really actually made a connection. A lot of people really, really liked it. And so, you know, what else we did as part of the rollout, it was very important to engage all of our people, especially at that senior leadership level, but also all of our PIOs out there, public information officers. You know, there are 12, we have 12 districts in Ohio. And so we educated them about brands because they needed help. They needed some training, some education. They were sort of our brand ambassadors out there in the state. We also had a successful presentation during our senior leadership retreat that Erica mentioned. That was really, really good. We also had one-on-ones after we got back from the leadership retreat, one-on-ones with each division head and their team with a presentation, engage with them. We had handouts. That went really, really well. And then also we timed those conversations up with internal emails that we call ODOT messengers to everyone. And basically every 2 days, we would push something out about the rebranding effort, you know, how they could access the materials, and really highlight, maybe it was logo usage for that email. We'd focus on that. And then maybe the next one would be email signatures. And that was really, really successful in helping with the rollout. As Erica mentioned, it was definitely the wild, wild west out there. You can see by some of these examples. And unfortunately, our team in the past, we were some of the, we were our worst offender basically of the brand because we wanted to. So I think that's why we did it. But like the wild, wild west, we needed some type of order. And so we found that besides telling people, hey, here's what you do, here's how you use this, we found a lot of success in showing people what they can't do because people had a lot of questions. Well, what about this? And could we do this? And this little screenshot here of all these logos that are not allowed to be used, you'll see as I go through the brand book real quick, we kind of showed people what not to do, from photography to email signatures, colors, logo usage, and it was very successful as well. And so before we get into what's in the guide, the color palette, the logos, fonts, one thing that we really focused on too early on in our brand book and talking to people about branding is the ODOT voice and what that meant. And, to us, this showed employees that how they speak and how we speak as an organization, it's really a reflection of the brand itself. And we did some other trainings with county managers out there in the garages and really talked about the brand. And again, part of that reaching out and all those touch points was very successful. But what you see in front of you here is what we called ZephyrDot. So one of the ideas, we had a brainstorming session and we were talking, everybody refers to us not as the Ohio Department of Transportation, but as ODOT. We didn't have a visual representation of that. And some folks on our team were kind of like, yeah, we get it, but this is a logo we've always used. It was a great forming sort of session between our team that we talked about for a while. But we really wanted something that was consumer friendly, easily adoptable to social and digital and across the entire department. And at first, it was pretty incredible. We rolled this out. Some engineers were like, well, I don't like the lowercase, and I don't like that. About 6 months, 9 months later, people were asking us if they could order materials with a ZephyrDot on it. So ZephyrDot, the employees themselves have embraced this logo, and it's almost become kind of our standard use for everything we do these days. And so real quick, what I'll do, I will show you our brand book. So you can see what's in here, our brand overview, our voice, the history of our logo. That was another big thing we talked about, about our brand, how we had early beginnings and, late 19th century and as a highway department from the Department of Highways. We really wanted to tell our story and start, from the past. Here's a history of our logo. You can see here in the guide the 4 different logos that we have. We talked about each one of them, how we use them. We have the reverse white, the reverse black. You see the business unit logos. Of course, everybody on their own brand. So we came up with a standard for that, using the word mark only. Here's Zephyr. You can see how it's used reverse white. You can see all the clear space around the logos. So they were very detailed. Our seal, and that's very official. This was very successful right here because we created a 1-pager that had this and had our color palette that we passed out to everyone. We emailed out to everyone, and it showed you, hey, you're going to have questions and you're going to want to know which logo should I use. And so this was very successful in helping people choose which logo would be best, depending upon what they were doing. You already saw that slide. There's our color palette. If you see here, the purple one, we continue to update our guide. Ever so often, we're adding new icons, new colors, new standards, and so we update this as we go, and then we send out reminders to people. Acceptable background. So there was a lot to go into this. What I'll do right now is turn it over to Erica to talk about the lessons learned.
Yeah, so I know we're running out of time. So just real quick, I wanted to say that generally this concept was very well received within the agency. It actually went over smoother than we had anticipated. I think people were, they wanted their stuff to look nicer. They wanted their stuff to look more professional, and we provided guidance and assets for them to be able to do that. I will say the 2 big sticking points were the business unit or the division logos. And then these you see right here, which are the email signatures. The standardized email signature was by far the most difficult sell for us and the thing that we still probably see the most violation of. But we have come a long way as an agency on the email signatures and everything else as well. So I think overall, how kind of deep thought it was and collaborative it was a good project that's really been embraced by the agency, and that we continue to make sure that we are updating regularly as the agency has needs for it. So it's been a great project, and if you haven't gone through it yet, it's definitely, I would say it's a worthwhile endeavor.
Great. Thank you, Dave and Erica. Great information. If you have questions for them, just a reminder, make sure you type them into the question box and we'll get to it after all the presentations. Up next is Scott Higley of the Georgia DOT. Scott serves as Director of Strategic Communications for the Georgia Department of Transportation. In this statewide role, Scott leads all strategic planning, development, and implementation of the department's marketing strategies, communications, branding, and public relations activities. Scott, I'll pass the screen over to you. Take it away.
Thank you, Andrea. I appreciate it. Can everyone see this?
We can see
Yes.
it, Scott.
Great. All right. Well, listen, I really appreciate the invitation to share our information with all of you today. And Andrea, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. It's a real thrill. This was a real labor of love and really a rare opportunity from a professional standpoint. I came from a long career in the private sector and had the opportunity to both build new brands and rebrand an organization over the course of that time. So when I learned upon starting at GDOT that this would be part of mine and my team's purview, I was really excited. The project took the better part of 18 months, and certainly think you'll agree, or hope you'll agree, that the results were worth the hard work and the lengthy timeline. I know Katina Lear, my co-pilot and second in command at GDOT Communications, is on the line too, so I want to be sure to recognize her and the rest of our team for her efforts. So let's jump right in. And I really thought it would be a good idea for us to start at zero. what exactly is a brand? It can be kind of a difficult question to answer for most people. If you ask 100 people what they think a brand is, you'll get 100 different definitions. But at its core, a brand can be described as the position that a company or an organization or an entity occupies in the audience's mind. It's the sum total of all experiences that people have with the organization, which really forms the attitude they have toward the organization. And in fact, you can even think of a brand as the emotional relationship between the consumer and the product or the organization. And I can't underscore those words enough, the emotional relationship. I think as government agencies, we oftentimes don't think enough about the relationship we have on an emotional level with our customers, and we should. We can't, for these reasons, we can't really build the brand, but we can certainly help shape it through our actions and our words and our visual identity. I'm a real believer that successful brands should engage with consumers and build positive brand associations. Now, everybody on this call works to do that every day in big and small ways. Certainly we do at GDOT, but the deeper the relationship and the connection with the brand, the more brand equity that exists, and that's an important phrase as well. Now, quickly, here's what a brand is not. It's not a logo, it's not a tagline. Those are certainly elements of branding, as Dave and Erica shared. And where I can certainly see so many similarities between their exercise and ours, and I'm sure you'll see them as well. But logos on their own don't constitute a brand. And a brand is also not a given. You can't take it for granted. It's not fixed or permanent. It changes all the time. And as a result, our visual identity systems need to change as well. So we'll talk about that. Now, most organizations that are focused on consumers are really good branding. And I want to share a few of these with you. What's in a name, really? Knowing that a visual identity is one important element of branding, what can a visual identity convey? Now, obviously, a brand or a logo mark is often the most visible single element of a brand, and it's inextricably tied to it. But here are some brand logos and some icons that you all know, and in some of these cases, you're likely to have a positive connection to the organization. You certainly likely have a feeling or opinion about each of these brands as I bring these logos up. Most importantly, you associate these symbols with that feeling, whether it's negative or positive, but these are elements that give a brand personality. One to point out here is Amazon in the lower left-hand corner, which I know is at the top of everyone's minds recently, certainly in the last year, but it's always had a very distinctive brand and a visual identity system. And I always looked at the logo here and I read the yellow arrow as a smile. So it's like, you know, Amazon makes me happy, but in my research, I found out that it's really an arrow that indicates from A to Z, which really is an indicator of Amazon's product line. So that was an interesting thing to find out about that particular brand. And finally, in the lower right-hand corner there, you see a brand that some of you may be familiar with just from watching your favorite Netflix series or any show, really. The state of Georgia has been very successful in both the business outreach to entertainment makers and distributors to film their works here in Georgia, but the state's also been very effective at branding those works. At the tail end in the credits of every entertainment program that you see that was filmed in Georgia, you'll see this very distinctive Georgia logo. Doesn't look like anything else. But the takeaway here is that no matter how subtle, the public links brands with icons, key brand messages that can be conveyed through strong visual identity. And as it relates to GDOT's rebranding, we deliberately chose consumer brands to emulate. Given our budget, our impact, our product and service, we should approach our communications like, yes, that of a government agency. We can't ever lose sight of that, but we can also focus on our communications as that of a consumer brand. And here's why. Our relationship with our customers is transactional. They provide us the bulk of our operating revenue, and in return, we provide the product or service, which in this case is transportation. So it's really not all that different from the private sector. The difference between GDOT and a consumer brand is that the consumer can't take their business elsewhere. So it makes it all the more important that we deliver on our obligation, that we're providing a level of quality and service that meets or exceeds their expectations and their needs. And part of our ability to be able to convey that level of service is through our messaging and our visual identity. An important case study that we looked at as part of this process is a great private sector brand, one I'm a big admirer of. It's Delta Airlines. And over the course of about 40 years, you can see that Delta's visual identity system changed and fairly dramatically over the years in terms of its logo and brand mark. But there's one consistent that's never changed throughout, and that's what Delta calls its widget. It's triangular, we're really two triangles in this iteration. The red and blue widget, which carried it through about 40 years of branding and visual identity here. And Delta was a very successful airline that grew over the years, but in the middle of the last decade, Delta hit hard times. The airline declared bankruptcy. And they were emerging as a leaner, stronger organization in 2007, and it was determined that it was time for a new visual identity system. And so here's what they settled on. Many of you are familiar with this logo. It's been in use for about 14 years now. And you'll see it's a big departure from what came before, just like the airline itself was a big departure from what came before. But you'll also see that the iconography here is strong. That widget carries through, even though it has changed, obviously, in appearance, as the entire logo has, but it's very strong, as is the typeface that was chosen. Typography simple, it's streamlined, it's very clean and modern, and there are no useless elements, very much like the organization itself. A swift, agile, lean, and aerodynamic organization. So there were some big takeaways here that we took with us. So at the heart of it, what does our brand, or really any organization's brand, really matter? And that we've seen that organizations evolve over time, as should their branding. And in the case of GDOT, we know that branding can help build recognition of our role in improving our infrastructure and driving economic development, making our lives better. We also know that it can give people a reason to believe in our efforts and to magnify and share our messages, get behind our projects, support the organization. It can generate goodwill, it can create insulation against negative perceptions, and it differentiates our work from others, but it also builds that emotional loyalty to our brand. And at GDOT, we were in the process of an evolution ourselves. In the years beginning about 2015, we were making significant advancements in working with our state legislature on a historic funding package, which helped advance our capital and routine maintenance, certainly, but almost more importantly, helping move forward massive and innovative transportation projects. So we were literally transforming how transportation would work in Georgia almost overnight and moving forward. And we were also looking to overcome some negative perceptions associated with the current branding here, the yellow and the blue. One of those things, some of you will remember, was what was referred to nationally in the media as Snowpocalypse, and really a series of events that were beyond GDOT's control. Hundreds of thousands of people were stranded in their cars during a winter storm, in many cases overnight. Many of them had to abandon their cars. GDOT, while not the only organization involved in this situation, certainly took a lot of the brunt of the blame. And big changes, big strides have been made in Georgia and certainly within GDOT since that time to make sure that this never happens again. Another very memorable situation that was more recent was the fire and the ultimate collapse of a section of I85 in Metro Atlanta. But both of these were very, very high profile situations. They were seen nationally, internationally, and so it was a bit of a black eye on the organization. So for all the reasons we previously presented and for these, it was time to make a change. So after many months of design work, we moved forward. But before we did that, we absolutely had to identify our goals. If you don't know where you're going, how will you know when you get there, right? So I won't go through each of these goals, but we knew we had to have a goal structure with this entire rebranding effort, or it might fail. So knowing that that was a part of it, you know, that was an initial step that we took, was to establish our goals. We also had to realize who our audiences were. Recognizing that this list of folks on the right, certainly not an exhaustive or a comprehensive list, but it was important to understand the prioritization of who we wanted to reach. And we carefully considered that, knowing that the key, knowing the who is the key to the how in terms of a rebranding effort. So both important elements. And then one thing that I highly recommend any agency in considering a rebrand, and this mirrors what Dave and Erica shared with us as well, involve your teams. And in our case, I mean across the entire department, not just communications. Bring people with different roles and responsibilities into the mix. You'll get a wide array of opinions. Some of them will be uninformed. Some of them will be surprising, but they'll be important when considering the current status and the future direction of the organization. And in our case, it was also important to report to our leadership and to our board, which guides everything we do, that we had an organizationally and culturally diverse group of internal contributors who helped shape the direction of our visual identity system. Admittedly, this is where we probably diverge a bit from a private sector organization, but that's an important divergence. So I wanted to share that key aspect of this project. And so after many, many months, I shared with you it was about 18 months, we finally settled on our new logo as a key part of our visual identity system, and here it is. And I'll get to you a bit more about how we got there, but I did want to point out one important aspect. We created several different official logo lockups, the orientation of the letters in the logo to the words that appear as a part of that, the word marks, in order that our logo would be malleable for almost any situation, more vertical or more horizontal. Either way, we've got a solution for an official branded piece that's in keeping with our brand standards, which I'll talk about in just a second. One other important element, and this also mirrors the Zephyr that ODOT's got, the focus icon. It's a visual representation of our core values under our mission and vision statement. And that's the primary reason we created this. At GDOT, we are flexible, we are open, we're committed, we're unified, and we're successful. And we felt that this was an important aspect as much from an internal communications perspective as external, because every time a GDOT employee looks at our logo, we want them to be reminded of the core values that we live by. But this icon also represents the ongoing nature of our work. It can be a highway stretching into infinity. It can be a bridge, depending on how you look at it. It can signify a rail line or an airport runway. It can be all the elements that form a connected transportation network. And this icon was conceived to stand apart visually from the logo so that it's a visual representation of GDOT without all of the other elements of the logo, and not at all unlike the Nike swoosh or the Starbucks mermaid that we've seen. Maintaining our visual standards. As Dave and Erica shared, we also knew it was important to implement a brand standards and guidelines manual as really the Bible of this whole effort. There was not a document per se that really served this need before under the previous branding. And like Ohio's experience at GDOT, it was a little bit of a wild, wild west situation as well. Lots of improper uses of logo and branding elements, lots of incorrect fonts, things of that nature. So by establishing this brand standards and guidelines manual, we gave such details as what fonts to use and in what situation. What photography should look like, how the logo can be used, how it can. I won't run through all of the details of that, but I loved seeing Ohio's work there. And a couple of things I wanted to point out with regard to our brand colors. The space blue and the pine green. Space blue is the color of the twilight sky and the sea. It's associated with depth and stability. It provided continuity from our previous branding, which used a slightly darker color value of blue. And then the pine green, which we think of as the color of renewal, that also reflects our strong adherence to environmental regulations and standards. But more simply, it also means go, right? And it reflects our constant forward movement. So consistency is important to successful branding. Once we launched our branding on July 1st of 2018, we rolled it out across every communications vehicle, obviously and literally some of our vehicles, our fleet vehicles. One thing that we put into place to be mindful of taxpayer dollars, unlike a private sector organization that would go through a rebrand where everything changes overnight. At GDOT, we didn't approach that in that same way. Arguably to make sure that we did not go to an expense that we didn't have to, and to be able to justify what expense we did go to, we created a program called Transition by Attrition. So as, for example, as fleet vehicles transitioned out with the old logo, they were replaced with vehicles with the new logo. But those channels that we could replace our logos immediately, we did so. And certainly the digital channels that you see represented here were part of that. We even created, for the videos that we make, we created a lower third that's animated and it's consistent. It prominently features the focus icon, uses our brand fonts. We even ordered mic flags, not unlike those that a TV station uses. And all of our video reporters, if you will, our communications professionals and spokespeople use those now. And one element that Dave and Erica touched on, I wanted to mention too, is that consistent email signature, which did not exist at GDOT prior to this rebranding. And boy, oh boy, convincing 4,000 people that it's in their best interest to change their email signature overnight when some of them in some cases didn't really want to because they were really attached to their old email signature. But we are now successful in that rollout. And email being as prolific as it is these days, it's just an element that you can't afford not to focus on and make sure it changes almost immediately. We even created, for the video projects I mentioned, a branded video tag, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second, but not unlike production company tags as they create videos or entertainment things. At the end of all the videos we distribute, we tag on this 3-second animation, and I'll show it to you. It also includes a happy little ditty music background. I don't think you'll be able to hear that today, but let me show you this. I've always really liked this because I think it just sort of exemplifies the type of agency that we want to be. We want to look approachable and friendly and in many cases modern, but this animated tag also represents all the modes of transportation for which we're responsible. So it just creates that additional opportunity for an emotional connection. Our messaging and approach also changed it. And as part of being a more approachable and personable organization, one of the things we did early on was we created a digital message board contest for our highway signs. And I know many of you have similar programs like this. For GDOT, this was brand new, and it represents a big sea change in terms of how the the department really approaches these things. We reached out to the public and we asked for funny messaging focused on safety, and we got some great responses, which we put into practice. But what surprised us was, and honestly, we didn't even try, was this garnered national attention. And this time it was good national attention. We appeared on Good Morning America, some publications out of New York, CNN, the Weather Channel. So a great opportunity to really exemplify through messaging the rebranding of the organization. And a more recent campaign that we launched just last fall, we really felt like the new brand and the success we saw with the digital message signs really gave us license to be funny, be more tongue-in-cheek, be more real, if you will. And so we launched our new litter campaign called Keep It Clean, Georgia, but you can see some of our taglines are definitely in a humorous vein. My personal favorite is the picture of the Lake Hartwell Dam with the caption, "Put your damn trash away." But the rest of the campaign really exemplifies that dramatic shift in messaging away from looking and appearing like a government agency. And then, it's hard to measure the success, but this is one way we've done it. As I mentioned, part of our audience is other government agencies and individuals who work for the state of Georgia. And we've got a couple of great examples here of folks who took the time and effort to reach out and really share with us their thoughts and their feelings about a new brand. And that's another thing that really surprised me, but it was very gratifying. And with that, I will thank you very much for the opportunity again and turn it back over.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Scott. As a reminder, any questions for Scott can go into the questions box and we'll get to them shortly. Our final presentation is by Michelle Godfrey on Oregon DOT's rollout of one of the nation's first pay-per-mile systems, ORGO. Michelle is ODOT's Public Information Officer representing ORGO, as well as Amtrak Cascades and other state transportation initiatives. She has 30 years of experience designing and leading marketing and public relations programs for government and nonprofit organizations, including the American Red Cross, Business Oregon, and Travel Oregon. Michelle, you're up.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome everyone, and I wanted to share with you the work that we've done on ORGO in branding a transportation program. So this is about the launch of a program that started in about 2001. Oregon started studying the fact that our financial situation was getting pretty dire and was going to get worse because of hybrid and electric vehicles on the road. We noticed that federal funds were getting scarcer and scarcer, and yet our costs were going up, and the gas tax is simply not keeping up. So our legislature in 2013 decided to implement a road usage charge program and give it a try. We had done 2 pilot programs in years prior, and so the legislature, in particular, these 3 legislators championed the program and decided to implement a fully operational but voluntary pay-per-mile program for up to a limited number of vehicles. That limit has since been lifted, but it is still voluntary and it is still fully operational. So my challenge was, how do you get people to volunteer to pay a tax? Quite a challenge. We realized that we didn't know enough about what people thought about road usage charging. People didn't know what road usage charging was. And I should say that throughout this presentation, I use the acronym RUC, which is our acronym for road usage charging. So we set out to understand and quantify the understanding of the funding problem. Do people get it? Do people understand what we're trying to do? We also wanted to identify arguments for and against road charging to see if there were barriers that we needed to overcome, or if there were some seeds of messaging that we could use to help spread the word among other populations. And then we also wanted to do specific brand and message testing. So we did a lot of research. We used, of course, all of our research results from the previous pilots. But one thing in particular that we did were these statewide telephone surveys. It was the one quantitative study that we did that would serve as our metric for the success of this initiative in launching the program. But we did a lot of other secondary and qualitative research methods mainly me going around the state talking to everybody who would listen, and I was actually doing most of the listening, trying to understand how people process their opinion, how they came to a decision or about road usage charging, and what that process looked like. And what we learned is that in 2014, which was just before our launch, that the majority of Oregonians were simply did not know that the funding problem existed. Yet, they've told us that maintaining roads was one of their highest priorities. So that was interesting. They didn't realize that their highest priority was in jeopardy. And so we would have to help them understand that. We also learned that less than a third of Oregonians would support this program. But yet the majority were simply unfamiliar with the concept. So we saw this as an opportunity. And when we got into our phone surveys, that became even clearer. At the top bar here with our exit survey, this was during the statewide listening tour when we were actually meeting with people face to face. We would invite people to town hall meetings and we would survey them at the beginning before any discussion had occurred. And at that time, 41% of people said that they thought a road usage charge was fair, which is pretty high. But, you know, given that we were inviting people that probably we knew or had some familiarity with the subject, maybe they thought maybe that increased that result. But after the discussion, after about an hour's worth of going through how the program works, what the problem it's intended to solve, and what we see the future of this looking like, 59% of people thought it was a good idea. But what became really clear was in the telephone survey. These are people that know nothing about it. Totally randomized survey. And at the very beginning of the phone call, understand this is a 4-minute phone call. At the very beginning, we asked them, what do you think of road usage charging? And 15% said that they thought it was fair. But after just 4 minutes of conversation about what road usage charging is and what it's intended to do, we saw a statistically significant increase in positive opinions toward road charging. So we gathered all our results, and based on all of our findings, both qualitative and quantitative, we discovered that we would have to do a lot of untangling of misperceptions. Our successful messages would have to untangle all the unfairness. And I guess it's kind of my thing to say that, you know, a tax is only fair so long as somebody else is paying it. And if I have to pay it, then it's wildly unfair. Well, there are a number of reasons for that. And, you know, so people need to understand what they're contributing to. And that in itself would take care of a lot of the unfairness issues. One particular unfairness issue, though, was the urban-rural divide in our state. And I've since heard from other states that they have the same issue, is that rural drivers perceive this road usage charge program as being entirely unfair to them because they have to drive so much just for basic services. So we contracted with Oregon State University to do a special study on the behaviors of urban drivers versus rural drivers. And what we learned was that rural drivers do take longer trips, but they take them less often. And urban drivers take a lot of trips of very short miles. And what it amounts to is, in the end, is they're equal, or essentially equal. There's no statistically significant difference between those behaviors. So it wouldn't necessarily disadvantage a rural driver. But that's very complicated. How are we going to explain that to people in a way that makes sense to them? Privacy has always been the #1 concern with road usage charging because it uses GPS technology, which tracks location. Our program, the law, our legislators designed it such that data for the program has to be destroyed within 30 days, which is far more stringent data protection than regular Oregon state law allows. So there's a heightened security for the program, but yet still people were concerned that we would track them going to places they didn't want to see them going to. So we have to help them understand what is at stake in terms of privacy. And then, of course, we had to show them how it works. This is a completely new paradigm for collecting revenue for transportation. The gas tax is easy. You pay it at the pump, it's invisible. and it's very easy. You don't have to account for anything. This involves a device that plugs into your car's data port, and that device transmits data back and forth, and drivers get a statement of their trips and what those trips cost. Now, the value in that is that you have a far more informed driver about how they're using the roads and what those trips cost to maintain those roads, and they're able to understand what their contribution is. That's not possible with the gas tax. But the downfall of that is that we have to educate people to understand how that works. So we devised our communications plan around a successful launch of the program. We were mandated by our legislature to get it off the ground July 1, 2015. And we did that. But in order for the program to successfully launch, we would have to have enough volunteers to launch it with. So our communications plan had to be planned for recruiting and retaining volunteer participants. But beyond that, for success of the legislation in the future and for ORGO to continue, we needed to achieve some measurable statewide acceptance for road charging. And how do we do that with public opinion? And then finally, we wanted to support a superior, not just good, superior volunteer experience, because we knew that people's experience in the program would define their opinion of it. And as people get experience, they solidify their opinion. So we wanted them to have just the best possible experience, so that they would, if they were neutral or negative before they joined, they would have a positive opinion as they were participating or when they left. A number of audiences. One interesting thing about this was that our state is very diverse in terms of urban, rural, and different types of audiences. And our message matrix was very tailored to sections of Oregon and what their particular concerns were. So we would address them first in those areas and talk about the road usage charge program in different ways, depending on the prevailing attitude in that area. Branding was the first step of the whole launch process. So I just wanted to show you what was involved in the entire process. Our path to launch was we created an interest list of people that maybe were interested in following the progress of the program, but weren't ready to commit to actually participating as a driver. We did a lot of internal education, educating our own communicators about it, because everybody's pretty much, this is a brand new concept, and most people don't know about it, even our own people. So we wanted them to be be able to speak to it if they were asked questions. We did social media engagement via Facebook and Twitter to launch the program. That was not successful for us. We ended up attracting so many trolls that we had to shut the Facebook page down, and Twitter as well. We also had, on our website, we had an interactive forum. That was a little more successful because it allowed us to have more in-depth questions presented, and then our staff team could provide in-depth answers, and hopefully a lot of people were able to benefit from that. But the best thing about what we were doing to launch this was giving people direct experience. The media desk side briefings and ride-alongs, I think, were perhaps our most effective tactic, in that we invited media representatives to be drivers in the program, try it out. They would get a device, they'd plug it into their own car, or they would have a station car, and then they would report out on it as they experienced the program as to what that was like. So that would be shared experience that others would benefit from as well. Website, video tutorials, press conference at launch, and then we made sure that we had a feedback loop in customer service so that we could continually get input from people as maybe their attitudes were changing or as their experience in the program became more and more extensive. And I just want to affirm Scott saying that you've got to have an emotional connection to the brand. This is really hard for government people that tend to lead with their intellect. and say that, you know, I make decisions based on, you know, an analytical process and whatever the best choice is. And I always push back on that, and I say, you make more emotional decisions than you think you do. You know, you're taking your car, you're going to go fill up for gas. Which brand of gas station do you choose? I would suggest that maybe there's a lot of emotional or personal value in that decision rather than just an intellectual analysis. So where we wanted to get is to a personal place. We wanted Oregonians to own this program as theirs. It's not a government program. It's not something you have to trust government with. This is a fair way for me to pay for the roads that I use versus where it was when we started. ORGO is a device in my car that's going to track my travel for the government. That's what we wanted to get away from. So we set out with the brand by starting with a bunch of focus groups to test out the name and the logo and what concepts people would respond to make this program more acceptable. From all that input, we developed a brand platform, which is kind of like the personality of ORGO. And at rollout, we started with internal trainings to make sure that our own people were the most expert on ORGO before we went out onto the external launch. So what did the focus groups tell us? Well, we asked people, rather than do you believe a road usage charge is fair? No, we got more basic. What do the roads mean to you? What does it mean to you to have good quality roads in Oregon? And this is what they told us. It represented forward movement. It's a conservation and an environmental issue to them. It's about safety and scenic beauty in Oregon. We have amazing landscapes that people love to road trip in our state. The sense of adventure and freedom. I had one woman in a focus group tell us that, you know, when I think about driving in Oregon, I visualize a car going down the road and all the windows are open. It's a sunny day and my dog's sticking his head out the window with his tongue hanging out. And that to me means freedom. And I thought that was really a great description of what our brand should be. We offered our focus group participants about 4 to 6 names to choose from, and 80% of them, which is a huge number, I thought, of preference, selected ORGO. But they had some very specific qualifications. The OR had to be capitalized because that's our state abbreviation. The E had to be separate from the GO because otherwise it looks like ego, and people didn't like that. So we took that advice, and with all of the focus group participants and feedback we got, we designed this RUC, or what is now known as ORGO brand platform. This is, like Scott said, the personality of the brand. This is like a person. This is like your best friend talking to you about road charging. You know, subject maybe you don't want to talk to, but you kind of like your friend, so you're going to listen anyway. So we wanted to be that friend. What is our vision? Roads are always going to be there for you. What is our promise? We're going to promise to make it fair for everybody. And then what are our values? Our values mirror what Oregonians value for themselves. They're trailblazing, fairness, privacy protection, of course, as a tax program and using this technology, self-determination. I get to decide. And, you know, I get to make choices about what trips I make or how I pay the road charge. And then our brand personality and voice is similar to ODOT's general voice, but it's just a little different. It's a little more quirky. It's a little more friendly. It's fearless. It's adventurous. We're very service oriented and respectful, because we were also told that while we want to be quirky and fun, this is also a government program and it needs to be authoritative. So we wanted to blend all of those things together. And this is where we landed. We took the GO and separated it from the E via color and typeface. And this image was kind of put together from about 6 different images that we presented. And people liked it because of the feeling of the open road. This is Mount Hood in the background. But very interestingly, this is Mount Hood from the east side of the state, which is the rural side. The most popular photographed version of Mount Hood is from Portland. And we wanted this to relate to people that were outside of Portland as well. And I'll just tell you as an aside, it took about 100 emails to get the snow on this mountain just right. So year one, we've been operating this program since 2015, and we've seen continued progress. But our first year, we met our goals. And this may not look like a huge bit of progress, but for us it was to launch the program. We were able to enroll more than 1,200 people. We got 2,500 subscribers to our interest list. These are people that are interested in following us, but they're not necessarily ready to commit. And media was 28% positive, which compared to what it was actually quite an improvement. And the majority was 52% neutral. In the past, we saw people or media talking about ORGO as a Prius tax or in a very negative way. And that all changed, well, not all of it, but it changed in a pretty strong way after the launch. And we saw a 19% change in attitudes, and this was our primary metric. We got statewide representation, not a lot in some of the more sparse counties, but at least we did have every county represented eventually. So the survey, in 2016, we went back and retested the same questions that we started with before launch, just to see how things had changed. And in 2014, we only had about 37% of people that said that road charging was fair. In 2016, big jump to 56%. That was really impressive to us. The support for the road charge program itself, the support for ORGO, not as much progress there. So yeah, it's fair, but oh, do I have to pay it? Maybe I'm not so much in favor of that. So, but even so, there was still an increase in support for the road user charge program itself moving forward, and we were encouraged by that. We knew that more outreach could continue to improve that metric. So since we've evolved this program into a campaign called Keep Oregon Connected, which is, the prime value that we're seeing people expressing about the roads is that it allows me to get to my friends and family. We want them to feel that connection when they think about our brand. So we've developed a feature video that TransComm awarded us as great for public education. Thank you, TransComm. And it's kind of sets off the whole campaign that describes for people how to calculate a road charge. What does it mean? How much am I going to pay? And all of those things. All those materials are at keeporegonconnected.org. I hope you take a look. And that's all. Thank you.
All right, Michelle, thank you. And thank you to all of our presenters for great information. We're running a little short on time, so I'm going to turn it over to Maggie to hopefully get to a question or two before we have to wrap up today.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrea. We do have quite a few questions. The first of which is everybody okay to share their presentations and their brand guidelines for Erica, Dave, and Scott? Are you guys willing to share those with the group? We can post them on the TransComm website if so.
Yep,
Yes,
absolutely.
and I can paste them to the chat or just email you, Maggie, whichever is easier for you.
Great, you can email me and everybody on the line. If you go to communications.transportation.org, you'll see the recording, the presentations, and we'll have the brand guidelines there if we can get those from the states, which I think we can. The next question is, for Ohio, what was your time frame for the change? Over what period of time did you make the brand changes?
Our process was about 6 months from the concept to when we had kind of the fully fleshed brand guideline book and all of the assets like letterheads and things like that done. And again, I would just say ours wasn't really a rebrand. It was a focus. So we weren't starting from scratch, and that sped up our process from some of the others.
Sure. Also for Dave and Erica, how do you enforce the use of the brand when you see any misuse, particularly on something as common as a signature block?
So occasionally we've made a lot of progress by just kind of peer pressure to be honest. And then we do send up brand refreshers via our statewide emails from time to time as a, hey, reminder, you can't, make sure your emails look, your signatures look like this. And then we will, when we see really egregious stuff, we'll reach out to somebody.
Great. Michelle, I think we're already going to cover this. Somebody asked to go back to a specific slide for you, but if you can send your presentation too, I think they would be able to catch it. They're very interested in the slide on the funding problem. So I think that will be helpful to people.
Sure thing.
How did you all get consultants on board with using your new brand standards? Did you have to include new language in your contracts? Did you hit any resistance? How did you deal with that?
This is Scott. I can address that. It's also one of the key reasons why we created the Brand Standards and Guidelines Manual. I can tell you that we were very fortunate to have widespread support from the leadership of our organization on down, which made it a lot easier for office heads and division directors to also be supportive. And in particular, it was important that those individuals were supported because it just trickles down. I remember early on in the branding process, a meeting that was called by heads of our planning and program delivery offices, and it was with a group of consultants in the room, and they basically said, this is your new branding Bible. Everything that you turn out moving forward has to be consistent with what's in here. So I can tell you, while it was a little bit of an arduous process, having had the buy-in of all of those individuals across the board made it much smoother for us.
Great. Scott, this also could be for you too, I think. Can you speak to additional photography standards and guidelines aside from the end cap and the lower thirds? How many photographers and videographers does your comms team have?
Sure. We actually have one photographer who is also does double duty as a graphic designer. And then we have a videographer who also has photography skills. So there's a little bit of overlap there. We do have a library of approved images that we update regularly, and we make that available to both to the consultants and to our internal groups. We do find that, and also to our 7 districts across the state, we do find that having that photography, and some of that also is generated by our district communications officers as well. And having that great photography that's really exemplary of the brand, but also images that are approved to use regardless of who's dipping in there to use them, really is key. We discourage use of, I guess, kind of renegade photos unless they've gone through the process of being approved through our office.
Great. Dave and Erica, can you elaborate on the meaning of voice in your brand book?
Let Dave take that.
Sure, absolutely. So for us, our brand voice, we are a government agency. We tend to, I think both Michelle and Scott mentioned this, authoritative, but also at the same time, sort of dry and kind of come across, I don't know, just like matter of fact. And we really wanted to evoke a voice that it just felt real to us. And it was, some of the words we used, we wanted to balance between being, warm, but also thoughtful and intelligent. We didn't want to use engineering jargon that we're so used to doing. And of course, you have one communications person talking to the media, using certain words, and then another person goes on, you read an article and you're like, well, they're talking about the same thing, they're using different terms. Let's talk about our voice and what that means and be consistent, right? And have that just positive, warm, and intelligent vibe going on.
Great. Just a couple left. Thanks to everybody that's hung in here. I know we're a little over, but I want to make sure we answer your questions. Let's see. Michelle, can you tell us what is the format for your email signature? Is it PNG or do you know?
I'm not sure that's for me. I didn't talk about email signature in my presentation.
Okay. I'm wondering if this person meant Erica.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, so we actually were able to put together a little template that folks can put in, but I believe that they are PNGs, the images, and then the text is not in the image. The text is typed into the signature line, if that makes sense.
We've got more questions on that too. In terms, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dave.
No, that's okay. I was just saying we have in the template that one of our designers created, we use Outlook, and so when you go into signature and create new, basically they would copy and paste that and then change, put their name, their phone number, and choose which logo they wanted to use. We had some standards around what they could use, but it was just basically a copy and paste, and we use Outlook. I don't know if everyone else does or not. That's all.
This is Scott.
In terms of
the process we used, Dave, and in the introductory email that came out from our commissioner, the head of our department, the day that we launched, it included, and here's the first thing you need to do, which is go in and change your email signature. It included a look at the template, and then it included a link back to the online resource where the template was living. And then everyone had to enter their personal information, but it can't, obviously each individual has to create their own email signature. So it's a process that took us a couple of weeks, maybe 3, to get it mostly pervasive across the agency. But yeah, that's how ours worked as well.
That was really helpful because a lot of the questions are, how do you even start getting employees to do this? Because I know, and everybody knows, it's kind of a struggle to get all employees to do that. So I think that you covered how to successfully do that. On average for you guys, how much, all of you, how much did you spend on the logo redevelopment or branding or rebranding process?
This is Scott. I can go first. We have contracts in place with a communications firm of record, an external communications firm. They don't really dip into our day-to-day work. They're more bigger picture projects that we just simply don't have the internal bandwidth to handle. So this was one of the projects that we gave to them. So they helped us through the design process, as well as certain aspects of the execution. Some of that was covered by our annual retainer, but all in all, any additional charges that were specifically a part of the rebrand, I think they added up to somewhere in the neighborhood of $75,000 or so. And those were not additional charges. They were just specific to the rebrand. It was all incorporated within our annual budget for that consultant.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say in Ohio,
Michelle?
because we did all the work in.
Was there a question to me, Michelle?
Yes, to everybody.
Okay, so did we work with a consultant? Yes, we worked with PRR, Public Relations Marketing Communications firm based in Seattle. We've worked with them for years on ORGO, and they were tremendously helpful in establishing our program.
Did you have a basic cost, Michelle, of how much this ran?
Our launch contract for 2 years was $650,000, but it's been quite a bit less than that since, for outreach. So that was to develop the brand and all of the initiatives that we did to launch the program, which was pretty extensive.
Great. Scott, you kind of talked about this a little bit when you said, your state DOT CEO sent out an email saying this is how you change your email signature. Was the language direct enough to say it was required that everybody changed it, or was it kind of just a suggestion? I'm guessing since it's a rebranding, it would be a requirement.
It was, as I recall, we created a lot of, I guess you described as flowery language extolling the virtues of the new brand, and obviously put that in the commissioner's voice. And as a part of that, he did briefly discuss the importance of consistency, as we talked about in the presentation. And one of the key aspects of that, in his opinion, was having a consistent email signature. And I believe, if I remember correctly, I believe that's exactly the phrasing that we put it in. So there was a very strong suggestion that it's something that should be tended to right away. And we did see pretty much widespread changes in terms of the email signatures that we saw, but to this day, occasionally we'll still see a variation from the template, and we will. I appreciated what Erica said about peer pressure. There's a lot to be said for deploying a little bit of that. And obviously, some people want to be individuals, and others want to be with the rest of the organization. So we still see it from time to time, but by and large, that problem is solved.
Wonderful. I think that's it for questions. Somebody also asked the website again for where everything is going to be posted. It'll be on the TransComm website. I think Andrea is going to go over this too in her closing remarks, but it's communications with an S at the end, communications.transportation.org. And that's the TransComm website, where if you go under professional development, you're going to see all of our past webinars, and you'll see this recorded one up as well as the presentations. Okay, I think that's it, Andrea. Andrea, are you there?
Oh, can you hear me, Maggie?
Yes, now I can.
Okay, sorry, that's so strange. It was unmuted, but I'm not sure. So again, thank you everyone for hanging in there. I know we went a little long, but there was a lot of great information, and so I hope you all enjoyed that. If you do have a follow-up question that we didn't get to or you think of later, our presenters' information is on the screen, so feel free to reach out to them, and I'm sure they would be pleased to answer you directly. As Maggie mentioned, today's webinar has been recorded, and we're going to post it to the website communications.transportation.org within a day or so. We're going to also have information on the February edition of the TransComm webinar coming very, very soon. So make sure you look out or you're on the lookout for an email communication from Maggie, or check back on the TransComm website for that information. On behalf of TransComm and Chairman Gutierrez, Scacchetti, I knew I was going to mess that up. Thank you to today's presenters. I also want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in and making this a truly educational session. Have a great day, everybody.